Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the very first episode of the Multiverse Infinitum podcast, where we are recording this currently on a potato smuggled out of Soviet Russia in the late 1970s. So, uh, I'll introduce myself. I'm the Fox, the host of this channel and the podcast. Um, and my co-host here, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Garrett, working on a little sketch. I'm sure we're going to have some great conversations today. I think what we've chosen topic was to focus on AI and its introduction into the community, its effects that we think it's going to have, how it could be scary, how it could be beneficial. You know,
The
I know
future
I'm
of AI,
reading
if you will.
some somewhat relevant subjects. Isaac Asimov's iRobot, which is kind of about the development of AI and letting it get out of hand, it assign its own directives and things like that.
So that is a good overview and introduction of the topic. Now, more specifics. You did start off already with iRobot. We're going to talk about some popular renditions and adaptations of AI, as well as maybe the origins of artificial intelligence in both literature and media. I think the quintessential starting point in almost any sci-fi topic, but in particular when it comes to created, is Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Um, and I think the very kickstart of the life being a natural force, the lightning, also adds to the credence of the machine, even though it's a machine of flesh. Also, kind of, first zombie kind of deal too. But the first machine was instigated through natural forces. And I think that that's a big theme in AI stories and machine stories is you are my creator, but there's a creator who created you. And that's the one that really created me. Which,
Yeah, getting more into the story of iRobot without ruining it. That's kind of exactly what the AI concludes. And I've only read so far to know that they've assumed it to be successful in its main job, which is to run their space station or their mining operation. And it's an administrative robot. So the robot essentially decides that they were created by what it labels as God, which is the creator, the star they're orbiting. Um, and they're like, you're defective, but then it runs the station pretty well. And so they decide that it's, actually working pretty well, even though it believes in some crazy religion. And they leave it. And that's kind of where I just left off, just starting it.
so yeah, what are some other popular renditions of AI or just, I guess, robots in general that you're familiar with or that you are that stand out to you?
I think the main theme in a lot of AI based literature and video games is the idea that AI will eventually turn on us. We have this kind of inherent fear that somehow machines we make are going to take over the world. And I think that's really reinforced by the people working with AI. They're more powerful than we expect. And we've seen that with like political propaganda being linked to Facebook and it being linked to like maybe tampering with elections through producing false media intentionally. And they wasn't really an intentional thing. It was an AI running their programs at the time. So I think it has a lot of credence to say that, it's a more relevant thing than ever that is that going to be ultimately something that is beneficial to us, or is it going to be more like all the science fiction books that AI will eventually turn on us? And I think what we're hearing right now from people like Nikola Tesla or not Nikola Tesla,
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Thank you. Jeez, that's embarrassing. Is that it's not so much how you program AI, or it's not so much the idea that AI would take over, like in the sense of its desire to be free, but it would be given a task and then make anonymous decisions on how to complete that task, which may be ultimately extremely destructive towards the human race. I think that's a much more realistic version,
So-
of AI takeover.
That is interesting. What do you think of Isaac Asimov's revolutionary idea of the positronic mind?
You know, the positronic mind just seems to be introduced pretty basically, and maybe he goes more into it in some of his other books. But so far, it just seems to be fully functional artificial intelligence that being capable of thinking much very similar to the human brain. And so I think the idea of positronic mind, at least in this book, is being pretty much presented as something analogous to the human brain, you know, and that's something capable of making independent decisions and is proving to be kind of beyond their understanding. It is implied.
Well, that's just the Turing test, right?
No. I'm saying the positronic brain is implied heavily in this book to be beyond the understanding of the people who created it. So they're kind of tempering with stuff, the forces they don't really understand. And in order to control them, they introduce a slider system, which I'm sure you're familiar with, like the 3 laws of robotics. You can't hurt people, you have to do what they say, and then you have to preserve yourself at last.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, kind of piggybacking off of that, one of the most popular non-Asimov renditions of one of the AI is Data from Star Trek Next Generation, which is sort of a spiritual successor to Spock from the original series as the logical, more um, machine thinking, and he's literally a machine, but he's more human in ways than Spock was. So they got to play a lot with that artificial intelligence. But Roddenberry's idea of the future is a lot different than, like you said, some of the more grim ideas of the future. Like, for example, we could go Frank Herbert's interpretation where they straight up had a war against the AI and they had a Butlerian jihad and destroyed all the AI and had no machine learning systems. So perhaps that is more, it's either that or the Matrix, right?
I think in a lot of the more optimistic versions of AI, you've seen the friendly robot that ends up sacrificing himself at the end in order to save the crew, and just displays like all these true or these things that we identify as virtuous and human and having heart.
What's an example?
Oh, what is it? iRobot? Is it not iRobot? What is it? The balloon robot? It's a Disney movie, isn't it? Or Pixar?
Up our Big Six.
Big Six, yeah.
Okay. What about Astro Boy? I mean, that's a classic Japanese.
Oh, I haven't read Astro Boy at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Astro Boy.
Yeah, it's a great animated film. It's a great cartoon series, and it's a legendary manga in Japan. And yeah, it's kind of Pinocchio with robots, I guess is the easiest way to sum it up. But he's a superhero. He's super cool. I guess another interpretation of it is James Cameron's Terminator series, right, with Skynet, and also their self-replicating AI, which Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, and a lot of our other brilliant minds of our generation have said is our AI, is self-replicating AI. Also famously, Joe Rogan is quoted saying, "We're the sex machines, or we're the sex organs of the machine world." Sorry, I butchered that, but I think that's a good image to give an understanding of what could give way here in the next 50 years.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. Sex organs
Well, then
of the machine world, just because they could use us to reproduce, and that'd be the only thing that they would really need us for.
Look at the Matrix.
But I think,
have you seen the Matrix?
I think one of the things people forget about AI is that it does what you tell it to do. We're literally its creators right now. So it's not going to do something, or even if it does do something that you didn't program it to do, you can literally reprint. And so I think it's much more viable that people will create a method of AI as like used to control people, which will eventually end up in the hands of the unsociatory. I think
like
you see that with
China.
Yeah, I was going to say the China social credit system.
But you blew me off about the Matrix.
I don't think people will ever be used as batteries.
Have you seen the Matrix?
Yes.
Okay, maybe not as batteries, but they're using their experiences, right? They're like hooking them up to a connected experience. So when you create these 15-minute cities and you lock these people down into these set amount of experiences, and you're profiting off of the way that they're interacting in these spaces, and you're basically sucking the life out of them, symbolically, you're doing the exact same thing that they did it, literally.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. I guess that is a good point, actually.
Which the
And
whole
that's a lot more
matrix is about
viable that
symbolism.
humans would need to use you as cattle rather than like a robot oppressor.
That's what Karl Marx was
I
trying
think
to
that's
say.
what I think I'm worried about AI is that it gives a very small number of people the ability to have a tremendous ability to repress the individual, especially through the means of speech, which we're starting to see come up here more. People fight against various things. I think we forget that the importance of an absolute freedom of speech and the ability to discuss, how to change our government, which is criminal in a lot of places, especially in China. You're not allowed to discuss meet as a people and discuss if you want to change the Chinese government. It's illegal. And I think in order to preserve that in its most absolute way, we have to deal with some other negative aspects of freedom of speech too.
Take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
So you'd say you're more of an absolutist when it comes to free speech, which if you haven't already noticed by listening to this podcast, we're just going to spout all the shit that is on our mind. We're not going to be like disclaimer or anything. So I definitely agree. And because of that, the best ideas usually tend to come to the top. Like it's hard to believe in bullshit for a long time when you're constantly open to hearing new and interesting ideas. Like the best ideas usually rise to the top. And that's why it's also good to get different opinions outside of, people form echo chambers even online, but certainly in their own communities, and they just want to talk with people that agree with them. And that just doesn't really produce very productive conversations. However, back to what you were saying about perhaps it infringing on our freedom. What if like you said, people using AI systems to control people? I type something in Twitter. Twitter has an AI, or I'm sorry, X. X has an AI system.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
that for problematic words and phrases, correct them, or delete them entirely, and then post my neutered version onto the social media.
What?
I think that's the next step.
Crazy.
I mean, censorship has already gotten out of hand. I don't think that what you're saying is out of line, that they would use these systems for larger controls of dominance. Also, the social credit score system in China. You can't even get through certain accesses without smiling in certain areas. You must literally show your teeth and be like, yep, we're happy. And then the gate opens for you. So that's just some small ways that we're seeing these. But I just wanted to start with examples.
That sounds crazy to me.
I just wanted to start with some small examples of media and literature so that we could kind of get a framework before we went all out crazy with it. But I already went to Mach 10 with it.
Fair enough.
I think getting back on track, though, we can talk about the future of it impacting writers and artists like this nerd. And honestly, shit, even podcast hosts. Right now, do you know what the number 2 most popular, like, regular podcast is?
No.
The Joe Rogan AI Experience. And it's a completely AI Joe Rogan podcast that he has fictional guests that he's never had on his podcast before. And they have 2 AIs using the voice generated systems of 2 celebrities, Joe Rogan and somebody else, and they have a fake podcast.
Really?
I don't know if it's number 2, but I do know that when I pull up Spotify, it's right like on page every time. That could just be tailored to my taste, but yeah.
That's a little disturbing.
You want to see the cover of it?
I do. I want to see it.
I can't play it.
I think we're gonna have to make a society as to what we're willing to consume that's generated by AI and what we're not. I imagine that we're gonna make a lot of concessions. There's gonna be a lot of, especially seeing these new art producers that just massive, and the algorithms used to create the art program are totally running illegally. They run on online software. Mm-hmm. So they basically go to Google and download thousands of images, and they use all of those images in their software. And it's so deeply embedded that it's kind of impossible to select out a specific image and be like, that's a piece of copyright.
Yeah, amalgam so much. Yeah.
And they've literally stolen everything online from every artist everywhere in order to produce that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's totally something that's been like, I don't know, just like not looked at, which is funny.
We're looking at it right now.
Just passed some laws,
We're guilty of it too because we used an AI generated image for the pro episode for this, and I'm not against checking.
Well, people are coming up with some interesting solutions too. I heard about what was it called? Nightshade. It was something named after some sort of venomous plant or poisonous plant. Yeah, I think it was Nightshade, but it's a algorithm that lets you embed invisible code in your images that eventually poison
the AI.
Yeah, the AI from stealing it online.
Isn't
they'll
that
make your
sinister?
any drawing into something else.
That's
The
interesting.
eyes of the AI. Yep. So there's also interesting ways that are
interesting.
People are using AI against AI.
Yeah.
And that'll be
Of
kind
course.
of maybe the battles of the future. AI versus AI hacking systems. What happens when you put up superhuman computers against one another?
So since we're going over the top and out of crazy, and we're using examples of, in media, have you seen Ready Player One?
Oh no, I think maybe.
It's like the Ohio is the tech capital, and they're like they have VR. Everybody has VR, and they're super into VR. And there's a world called Oasis, and like everybody plays the game, and your score in the game is like pretty good, but it has a lot of good references.
So I've seen a few anime about this. I don't know if it's become like a really mainstream popular idea yet, but I know it's going to at some point be very real. How do you think AI is going to affect gaming? Do you think we'll be able to have artificial worlds programmed indefinitely?
I think gamers.
I saw some interesting gamer or some game robots.
Don't ask me a question and then don't let me answer.
But let me give you one more prompt, which is I saw some interesting game scientists using ChatGPT to create individual characters and then programming them aspects to see if they could create, something synonymous with like a real world that they didn't have to give them prompts. The AI would be able to do all these different things. And they had some awesome things, which is like an AI bot threw an entire Valentine's Day party and like sent out invitations to all the other bots and like got all these decorations ready. And like they didn't program it to do that at all. It just did that on its own. A few other things did some interesting things. So
yeah,
you could have like things that were independently generating quest lines.
And
if so, does it give any credence to the idea that we are living in a simulation?
No, you can't ask me 3 questions. Which one do you want the answer?
All right, whatever you ideas you want.
Okay, so
drop others. They're not that important.
Procedural generation has been in gaming quite literally since the 90s. So it's nothing new when you're saying like give all AI is, especially in its current form as we see it in computing, gaming, even at Boston Dynamics, is a procedural set of codes that interact dynamically with their environment, which it turns out the most difficult part to program within that is the observation. Observation for us is given because we have
that makes sense. Yeah.
But the observation of a mechanical device and the extension of their body, quote unquote. And I've been in Lego robotics since I was freaking 8 years old. I've been programming this stuff for a long time. Is creating the observational methods required for the given task outside of their models. So ChatGPT, for example, is an amalgam, just like you're saying with the image. They're an amalgam of models. They're not an inherently new thing. It's more of a grotesque falsehood. And that's why what's so interesting is, do you know Alan Turing?
No.
He was a computer scientist.
Yeah. I know the Turing test for sure.
Yes. So indistinguishable from humans. I think the problem in that is the average human has become much more aware of those like scams or those.
ChatGPT already did that. It did it online. It was given $50.
Let me just finish this real quick. The average person, I think, can already know if they get an AI message from a girl or if they get, from an app or something. I think the average knowledge of that is much higher than it was when Turing said that. So saying fooling the average person, if it can fool the average person into being indistinguishable from a machine, then the bar is raised so much higher nowadays because of our exposure to these systems. And I think that that's more challenging on the AI to seem more real because it's easy to expose those models and those patterns because humans are naturally pattern recognizable. We notice things quickly. And especially our generation, it's really hard to fool us with robot messages or robot, you know what I mean?
I think it also really depends on the circumstances because ChatGPT technically passed the Turing test. It was given $50 to do a simple task. I don't remember what the task was. It was something like changing a light bulb. And it was ordering a pizza. And in order to order the pizza, it had to like pass a CAPTCHA exam. And so it went online and requested someone's services for $50 by posting it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or something. And someone came by and they said, "Wait, you're not a robot, are you?" And then ChatGPT replied, "No, I'm not a robot. I'm blind and impaired, which is why I need your services with the CAPTCHA." And then they went in and they did it, and they paid him $50. And yeah, it convinced someone that it was a blind disabled person instead of a robot.
way.
Yeah, it did it. That's what happens when you
interesting.
gave AI money.
Why don't you send me that link? That's interesting.
All right. Yeah.
Because that is definitely new information that is interesting. Like brings new light to this argument. Have you studied or watched anything from the Boston Dynamics or the MIT guys on AI or
No, not really.
mechanical?
I've seen a little bit of their robots for like robotics program.
like self-driving cars and stuff.
No, mostly like just the pure robotics. Like they've been working on a robot that walks around like a person.
Mm-hmm.
And at first it was very clunky and it was difficult to even make walk, and now it's like doing backflips and stuff.
Yeah, that's the Boston Dynamics guys.
Yeah, that's them, but I think that's the robotics program, not AI.
So that's the same.
No, robotics is different.
My point is they're saying because they have these complex modules, it is now it's more, I guess the more correct pronunciation would be like proto AI, but it's still in the realm of and the
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's because their models are so complex. And like I said, even Lego robotics, like you have like a page of code. You have a page of code. What happens when you have 5,000 pages of code? And that might be underselling it, but let's say 5,000 pages of code. And then I say, okay, go pick up this ball. It will find the most strategic way based on its observation and its code to go pick it up. But if it doesn't, then it just has to do the one thing I did. And if it did it wrong, I have to reprogram it. That's a lot of mechanics is trial and error. But because these complex systems are so much, they're seeing the trial and error within the
I have seen a lot of studies that are like they give a simulated robot a task. They're like, you have the ability to move these appendages on these axes. Can you? And then they give them like 6 days to run, and they try thousands of times. And I've seen it a few times with like little soccer bots or like things that just try to learn to walk, to try to learn to new ways of like maybe making robotics into motion. They give it like basic little arms and stuff, and try to give it a task, which is walk. And so I think a lot of what's going on now is like making self-learning robots, things that absorb information and can learn from there, and then they give them the ability to make autonomous decisions, which I think is what bridges it into AI. The ability for the robot to select useful information for its task and then anonymously work it into its behavior rather than having to rely on a specific code. It can just learn. And so that's like the self-learning.
Is that experiential or based on the pool of the knowledge that they've created from?
Who knows, but it works.
I don't think it works if it's from the pool of knowledge, because then you can still say that the human intellect that programmed it was superior. But if it can learn from its experiences, then it can experience things that the programmer did not intend.
Yeah, and that's totally what you're seeing.
To the creator. We're seeing that. I mean, that's why I was so interested about the pizza story. I'm like, if that's true, that's very frightening /
yeah, maybe don't give AI money. A lot of we're going to be seeing introduced.
Yeah, what do you think Karl Marx would think of AI?
I think everyone that's intelligent is going to really recognize the threat it has, or the ability to threaten
the workers.
Well, yeah, and it also posed the question in its best. What if it did alleviate all of everyone need to work on anything?
Ever?
How do you think
like post scarcity?
Post scarcity, like what if it did solve the world's
Star
problems?
Trek. This is why I love this.
You think people would actually manage Star Trek, or would we find a different way to repress people? Yeah,
we would be doomed, and we would go through a Butlerian jihad, and we would destroy machines, and humans would become more revered and godlike.
And then what do you even use this money?
The spice melange, the things that would enhance the human brain.
Guess so.
It would allow for space.
Or
travel,
do you just have
elongate the life?
Oh, what was the movie? Idiocracy.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
You just turn it into Idiocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Or is there some nations that go to Idiocracy and some nations that go to like massive oppression?
I personally thought you were only talking about the U.S.
No,
but you think having a global context is important too. I think Japan develops mechs before we do, hands down. Look at their obsession with giant robots versus ours. They're way more into it. They're way effective, and they're way doper. We might have superheroes first.
Superheroes. Oh, you want to go into genetic modification?
Absolutely. Look at The Boys. I love the way The Boys did it.
That's also something I think people aren't realizing is how close we are to that. It's
CRISPR.
Still really repressed by
genetic
the laws, but
designer baby.
Yeah, designer babies for sure are gonna happen.
Then you won't be able to draw shit.
Why? Because all the designer babies will beat me out.
You're like both hands ambidextrous.
So they said about AI, but every time I've given. So here's the thing I think also about AI is every time I've like drawn something I kind of liked and then given AI a prompt or like tried to have it recreate what I drew, it just doesn't work. So there's still that ability to envision something and bring it about that AI just doesn't have.
Perhaps it was your lack of ability of articulating the concept to it, and if you've given enough words and descriptions, it would give a superior rendition.
Maybe pretty detailed.
User error. User error. Can we give room for user error when it comes to AI, just for the benefit of the doubt of the machine?
Well, I think also
maybe
if it does become your own art. If you prompt it with like 19 paragraphs to build something super complex. I don't know how many people have
now we're
that.
cyborg. Okay, this is. I'm glad we're wrapping on this. So perhaps we're looking at this as a us versus them, when truly our future is integrated. The death of humans, the death of AI, the birth of a cybernetic individual. Look at us now. We can't go anywhere without this, right? Pretty soon, it'll be just attached to our arm. It'll just be part of us. And we'll be able to just look shit up, and we'll all be linked to the internet. I mean, Elon Musk talking about Neuralink, right?
Yep. Well, I think that's
it's an interesting proposition to talk about cybernetic humans if we're talking about AI versus humanity. Perhaps the best amalgam is not one, or the best result is not one or the other, but the unison of both. And machines make humans better, and humans make machines better.
That's kind of scary.
I think it's fucking cool.
You want to be a machine?
RoboCop! RoboCop! RoboCop's way cooler than Terminator. So if you enjoy, please click that like button, subscribe, leave it in the comments down below. What was your favorite rendition of AI or robots or any of that cool kind of stuff? And join us next time if you're interested. But yeah, as always, ladies and gentlemen, have yourselves a wonderful day. Peace.